Hello, everyone. This is Dorie Clark, and we're here with a special LinkedIn Live edition with my friend Luis Velazquez. He is the author of a new book. You can see it right there behind him, Ordinary Resilience. Luis, welcome. It's so great to have you here.
Thank you, Dory. I've been looking forward to this conversation for a long time. Thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Well, Luis is someone whose career I have been following for a long time. In fact, he was one of the case studies, someone I wrote about in the long game. So I'm very excited that he now has his first book out. So, Luis, the first question, of course, is why did you pick this topic? Why was resilience something that was particularly meaningful for you?
Um, Dory, when I started writing this book, it didn't start as a book. My dad had a horrible accident back in when I was about, I don't know, 10 or so. But somehow he came back, roaring. He turned his life around. And at the beginning, we were really poor. And after the accident, he just became this incredible successful business person. Uh, I had my own story, let's put it that way. I was a professor of fungal genetics at Michigan State University. I had the world, basically planned for myself, and then all of a sudden I had a brain tumor, and coming back from that, I had to, reinvent myself. When I started writing the book was just a way to understand my dad and myself. And here is why. People will say to me, wow, you're so resilient. Wow, you're so strong. How do you do that? And in my mind, I wasn't doing anything different. I was just living my life the way I knew how to live it. And I think that what I started doing is trying to write my stories and write, the things that reflection pretty much, to understand myself and my dad. And it turns out that this turned into a book, but it didn't start as a book. So now, to your question is what was the concept of resilience in there? When I started writing, that wasn't in my radar. I was just trying to understand what it was. What is it that I was doing, or what is it my dad was did in order to, come back roaring and be successful. And I was reading the Adam Grant book Plan B, and he was talking about bouncing forward, or resilience, with the context, in the context of resilience is just about also getting better and thriving after something horrible happened. And I realized, oh my God, this is what happened to me and my dad. So that's where I made the connection. That before I wasn't thinking about resilience. I was just trying to understand my dad and myself.
Well, that's a really interesting point, Luis. And Luis is a noted executive coach out of Silicon Valley. He works with top CEOs at many companies. He teaches at Stanford and has really done a lot of interesting research around this topic. And so, Luis, something that I think is particularly relevant at this time. There are so many people who feel like, whether it's because of the pandemic or just all the general mishigas of the last few years, they feel like honestly they've had setbacks of one kind or another, whether it's a professional setback or a personal setback, which in some cases can leach over into the professional. And it feels oftentimes when you're in that moment like you're never going to even get back to baseline, much less be able to improve or get better from where you were. I think it often feels like a little bit of a hopeless situation. But what you're talking about is the opposite, a kind of anti-fragility of being more resilient than we think, and so much so that we actually can get back better than baseline, which is really interesting.
Yeah.
So maybe you can talk a little bit about this. I mean, I'm struck by the title of Ordinary Resilience. You were making the case that it's not like some superhero thing, that this is actually sort of surprisingly more common than we might think. What do you mean by that? And why is it that that's not the common perception? How have we missed that?
Well, there is so much on what you asked me. I don't know where to go, but let me see where I can go. The title first, Ordinary Resilience. When I think about this, as I said, when I was telling earlier, it's like I wasn't doing anything different at all. I was just living my life. I didn't see myself as a special. And the reality, Dory, is that we as humans are already resilient. You see what I mean? What I mean by that is that we are the most the the the, the, ap- the biggest predator in the world. We live in every single continent. We are the most resilient, the more adaptive species in the world. So that is ingrained into our DNA. Uh, so we have access to things that sometimes we're not aware of. So that's number one. Number two is that a lot of times when we think that we don't have options is when we give up hope. You see? So I think that the key here is to realize that we always have options. One concept of the book that I had that I had, which is also my coaching philosophy, is that if I want to act differently, I need to think differently. And in order to think differently, I need to see differently. So the book allows us to see what options do we have. And by the way, doing nothing is an option. So a lot of times people feel that are hopeless because they feel that they don't have a choice. And the reality is that we all do.
Yeah, that's such an interesting point. I love that. So let's get down into brass tacks. If there is someone, let's say maybe a leader that you're coaching who feels like there's been quite a big setback that they are dealing with. They need to be resilient intellectually. That's what they want to do, but they're not necessarily sure how or even where to begin under the circumstances. What are the things you tell them to do? What does a coaching session with Luis Velasquez look like?
Well, I think that going back to to the book, the pillars of resilience, number one is embrace the suck. It's
Embrace the suck.
embrace the suck. Understanding that that's where you are. And I remember when I was coming back from the brain tumor, and I was being so hard on myself because I was trying to what is the word? I was proving I was trying to tie my identity to what I did in the past, and I was a professor, so I was a big deal. So when the brain tumor happened and I wasn't a professor anymore, I felt like a failure. You see what I'm saying? What I realized is that there is a difference between what I do and who I am. Right? So when I'm coaching people, it's like that's the most important thing is who are you? Rather than what do you do? Because when you accept who you are in the moment, then it's easier to move forward. So when I'm coaching individuals, is one of the questions that I ask is, what do you want to be known for? Who are you? What are your values or what not? Now let's tie those two moving forward, because where we are is where we're supposed to be. You see what I'm saying? There is nothing we can do about the past. The pandemic started, it's over. My wife left, it's over. I cannot change it, but I can change how I move forward. And the first step is to embrace that situation where you're in, and then start, seeing things differently, so we can think differently.
That's a really fascinating point, Luis. I love that. And one of the things that I happen to know from having spent a lot of time with you, you have been a wonderful part of our recognized expert community. You've been in my mastermind for a number of years. So I happen to know that one of your special ninja skill sets is creating these formulas that help describe things. And you're really uncannily good at that. And you have proposed a formula for resilience that I think is really interesting. Maybe you can talk about it. It is optimism times commitment plus persistence. Talk to me about that. Where did that come from, and why are those the key ingredients?
Uh, Again, when I was reading, when I was trying to figure out, what was it I do? What was I doing? So one thing that I did is trying to understand how I do things. And those three things came to my mind, like I am committed, man. And when my wife tells me that you can be a drug addict very easily, because when I go into something, I'll go all in, so I'm committed. The other thing that I realized that in order for be committed, sometimes we're committed, but we're not persistent. And the persistence means that life is hard, Dorie, and things go up and down. So being committed and being persistent, understanding that it's not going to be easy, is the second element. Life is hard. I'm thinking about this. When I'm running, ultra marathons, 100-mile race. Those are hard. And there is an adagio among the ultra marathon community when they say, if you're feeling good, just wait a little. If you're feeling bad, just wait a little. Things will change. So, but what makes us go through the hard times is the persistence and the commitment. So now, those two by themselves are a recipe for burnout. Yeah, those two by themselves are a recipe for, oh my God, the well-being goes down right. Well, what makes it better is the optimism, and what I mean by that is a multiplier. So that's what I put the multiplication formula. If you're not optimism, if you're not optimistic, you have zero resilience. And what it means is that the optimism allows me to think that these bad times that are going right now are not going to end forever. And we all have to have like what I call a aspirational goal, because that aspirational goal is what feeds the optimism that will allow us to be persistent and committed. So that's where it came from.
Yeah, that's really interesting. This is Dorie Clark. We're here with Luis Velazquez. He's a top executive coach, leader to high level leaders and CEOs. You can learn more about his business at velascoaching.com. His new book is called Ordinary Resilience. If you have a question for Luis, feel free to type it into the chat. We'd love to hear from you and hear what's on your mind. And in the meantime, Luis, something that I'm particularly curious about is misconceptions. What do people get wrong about resilience, and what would you say the truth actually is?
I think that what I hear about it is that we confuse a lot of resilience with endurance. And you're in a toxic relationship. Oh my God, you're so resilient. Yeah. You are in a job that is actually bad for your health. Oh my God, you're so resilient. And I think that the way I see resilience is that has two other components beyond surviving. One is adapting. Okay, so adapting, I deal with it. I can deal with that, with affecting. But the other one is thriving. And what I mean by thriving is, when I think about myself, I am what I am, not despite of the tumor, but because of it. So people ask me, what if will you wish you didn't have it? Absolutely no. I am so happy that I have it. And in fact, I have a funny name for my tumor. They call it my precious. And the reason why, because it has allowed me to be who I am today. So I think a lot of times, one question that I ask my clients is, what is it that you can do today? So 2 years from now, this crisis that you're having right now is the best thing that ever happened to your career. So I think that the is going to embrace the suck, like, oh my God, it's not just embrace it, but love it, and then how can you use it to move forward? So I think that the biggest misconception is that resilience is tied to simply enduring. And I feel that resilience is much more than that. It's adapting and then thriving, just like we have as a species, as human beings.
Yeah, I love that, because part of it, to a certain extent is endurance, but it is so much more than that. It's not just sort of passively accepting all the things that are coming at you. We have more agency in the situation than we think. So I really appreciate what you said about the power of choice and our ability to make choice. Now, I'm interested, Luis, a lot of your clients are senior leaders. We can, in theory, right? We can control ourselves. We can control, if we're good, if we're thoughtful about it, we can control our emotions or how we're responding to things. But it's much harder if you were trying to lead a team or, a group of people, and you can't force them into anything. You can't force them to think a certain way. If you are a leader, what are the things that you can do to actually create the context in which your people are more likely to be able to be resilient?
I have two children, you probably know that, and one is 10 and the other is 6, and I learned so much from them. And I think that children mirror the behavior of the parents. So if you're a leader, I think that the best thing you can do is model the way. Once you model the way and you care about your teammates, not as children, but you love them and you want them to grow, people are going to see differently, and then therefore think different and act different. I have seen this so many times. A lot of the work that I do is with dysfunctional teams. you know I had a group of people that they stopped having team meetings because they couldn't see each other. They could not talk to each other, so everything was through email and text messages and secretaries. The one thing that I address is the interpersonal dynamics behind the issues. And the reality is, Dory, is a lot of times, we make assumptions about people, and we make assumptions about the things that happen. So the best thing that we can do is ask, why do you do that? What do you mean by that? So to take away that level of doubt and black holes that we if you don't tell people your story, other people will make it up for you, and it won't be the one. So a lot of times we come and we want to be results oriented, and we enter the room barking orders. And if we just bark orders, people say, oh my god, he's a late driver. But if we go and say, hey, listen, we are in this together, we are going to succeed. I am treating you like this because I know you can handle this and you can do more, and then you can bark your orders. People will receive it completely different. So going back to your question, I do believe that leaders in organizations need to model the way.
Yeah, that's a great point, Luis. Thank you. This is Dorie Clark. We're here with Luis Velazquez. He's the author of the new book, Ordinary Resilience. He's a top executive coach, and this was great. Your frequent Harvard Business Review co-conspirator and contributor, your fellow contributor, Jenny Fernandez. You've done some great articles together. Jenny is saying we are who we are because of our full life experience. We are where we are meant to be. Well said. I think that's great. And certainly we can all learn how to be more resilient. This is powerful information. And some great questions are coming through, Luis. One came from Jen. She wants to know, is it that we reveal resilience through the situations that we're facing, or we build it through them? How do you think about this question?
I think it's both. We are already resilient. We already have what we have. What we need to do is be intentional about how we live our lives. What I mean by that is that we need to think ourselves as resilient, and take advantage of what we have. The reality is that we already have everything that we need to take the first step. So going back to what you mentioned earlier about how leaders can model the way, I think that the number one thing is about wanting it. Saying wanting it, because if you want it, you will do it. Yeah. So going back to the question is like, how do we reveal the resilience that we have? Is being intentional about it. It's saying, I'm resilient, and therefore I am going to, to put myself through little things to build my resilience. One thing that I do with my kids, I have a 5-year-old, a 6-year-old now, so we still shower together. And one thing that I do is like, at the end of our shower, we put cold water on, just cold water just to get that shock. That is simple little things, intentional, like I come home and, I said, I'm going to park on the other end of the street today, just intentional about doing things differently. So you can start building that muscle that you have already, but the key is being intentional. Building your relationships. It's not about just building a relationship because it's a great thing, but because you're building your social resilience. You're building that. Now, here is the one thing is that is very tied to the book that you wrote. It's a long game. The worst thing that you can actually do is build resilience when you're in the middle of your crisis. You can't do that at a moment. What you need to do at a moment is how you're going to survive, and then to start thinking how are you going to adapt and thrive. What I mean by resilience is that the less time we spend in survival, the more resilient we become.
Yeah, that's really well put. The book is Ordinary Resilience. You can find it on Amazon. Just Google Ordinary Resilience, Luis Velazquez. He is the author who is here with us today. And we are learning about how we can be more adaptable and resilient in our both personal and professional lives. Luis suggests cold showers, among other things, which I am not in any way brave enough for. I try it. It's terrible. So I'm very impressed that you can do that. That's pretty awesome, Luis. But we're looking for some other strategies as well. You've been sharing some amazing techniques and ways to look at resilience. And a question came in looking for even more takeaways. Lavinia wants to know, what are some strategies that you use to stay positive and motivated when things get tough? That's definitely at the core of all of this. What do you say, Luis?
I mean, I believe that the outcome, sometimes we put a lot of value on the outcome. When I get a job, when I get this, when I get that, and I think that the learning and the resilience happens in the journey. What I mean by that is that we need to enjoy the journey, and so going back to when I first learned that I had a tumor. I was sitting in my living room with my wife, and then the phone rang, and it was the doctor. And the doctor said, I mean, hey, you have a tumor, and that moment my world collapsed, completely collapsed. So the one thing that I did at that particular day is I decided to go for a run, and in that run I cried. I did so many, like I was like, oh my gosh, what am I gonna do? I'm gonna die. But when I came back, I was committed. I'm gonna fight this. I'm gonna fight this. I'm gonna go down fighting. And the key here is that the result, it didn't matter. What I mattered to me is the journey that I was gonna go into. So I think that how I keep positive, I enjoy my journey. I mean, I that's what I do. And the present moments, and knowing that as you learn and get stronger, you're going to and accomplish your goals.
Yeah, that's terrific. Luis Velasquez, he's the author of Ordinary Resilience. On that point, just to put an even finer point on it, Luis, what you're talking about in terms of how to stay motivated when times are hard, so important. But one of our fellow recognized expert community members, Eva Klein, had a follow up question. Some people feel so hopeless. How do we get them out of the hole? If someone is already in a state where they're feeling like, they're so far down, it seems almost impossible to kind of climb up. Is there anything we can do? How would you think that through?
There are two things that personally have worked for me, and two things that I actually encourage my clients to do that. Number one is the idea that where we are right now, and we feel hopeless, is because, as I mentioned earlier, is because we feel that we have no choice. So it's the people that are hopeless is because they feel that they have no choice. And so the most important thing for me is to understand what choices they can make at that moment. Because when they make a choice, then, oh my God, I'm not helpless anymore. I actually have a choice here. So that's number one. The other thing is, I think that I shared with you, that the darkest time of my life was I was contemplating suicide. At the moment I was thinking, oh my God, how am I going to do it? How? No if, but how? And I was curled in my kitchen, thinking about all the things that I lost. My marriage, my professional dreams, and everything else. And then in that moment, there was an image that appeared in my head. It was the image of my mom. And I said to myself, I cannot do that to her. If I do that to her, it will kill her, and it will suffer tremendously. Therefore, I'm not going to do that. So I think that a lot of times, we feel that we are the center of the world, and the world is bigger than us. So if we find something else bigger than us that gives us the motivation to move forward, like right now, is my children, my children and my wife, my family. So my goal is to grow two kids that are resilient, kind, confident, and kind and strong. So that's what motivates me to do everything else that I do. So I think that the world doesn't revolve around me. My world revolves around my children, and finding something that is actually meaningful to us will keep us motivated to go through to be committed and to be persistent.
Yeah, that's a really excellent point, Luis. That's great. We are nearing the end of our time together. We have one more great question that came in from Brent. He wants to know: is there some form of acknowledgement of adversity or injustice that helps with resilience? Is there kind of a power in naming it in some ways, or how do we think about those early steps? Is that useful?
Um, I mean, I'm aware of the time here, but I want to tell you a quick story.
Yeah, please.
I was teaching a class at Stanford one time, and we were talking about diversity and inclusion. You know, and this woman was, oh my God, she was so passionate about diversity and inclusion. She was, her life was dedicated to that, and she had some great programs, and she built a company, and I was so curious about her, and I said, why, how did you get so passionate about diversity and inclusion? And her story was that she grew up in a white neighborhood, white parents, and then she moved to a city where it was more inclusive, more diverse. And she went to college there, and she was discriminated there, you know, and because being white from the Midwest. And in my mind, I was thinking, is that it? Oh my God, are you serious? That's where it came from. So, but then it was a learning from me that I think that the experience doesn't matter, because my experience can be so brain tumor, blah blah blah, but we don't have to go through that. You see what I'm saying? But to their point, name it, absolutely. I think that we need to find what is the anchor of the story that we're gonna give us the pivotal point in building that resilience. What is the thing that for her, that was the story? And to me, it's like, are you kidding me? That's all? You see? So I think that the different perspectives, the different experiences are not determinant to building the resilience. The key is naming it and embracing it.
Yeah, that's a great insight. We have been here chatting with Luis Velazquez. He is the author of the book Ordinary Resilience. You can see that on the wall right behind him. You can get it at Amazon or other great bookstores. And you can learn more about Luis and his coaching practice at velazcoaching.com. Luis, thank you so much for taking the time to join us and be here.
Thank you, Dorie. I really, really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And thanks to everyone for joining. You can check out Luis's book, Ordinary Resilience, today, and take care.